to Beyond the Ring, a podcast that covers all things in the stock show industry from the informative to the insane, starring Ryan Rash.
Every time a liberal speaks, I feel my brain cells committing suicide.
And Dale Hummel.
You should sacrifice something and prove your competence level to gain the right to vote.
Now on with the show.
Welcome to Beyond the Ring. This is Dale Hummel, along with co-star Ryan Rash.
Hello, hello, hello.
Ryan, there's not much happening this week. I hope we have some current events we can talk about. I don't know. Do you have anything in your mind?
Oh, I don't know. Just the world's coming to an end. But other than that, it's fine, I guess.
I've been doing a little therapy today.
Dale, because I'm not even going to go there with you. You, who were supposed to be like somewhat my equal on this, when it doesn't go the way that you had in your little mind, you just wrap yourself up in a cocoon and say, screw it, I'm not dealing with it.
That is incorrect.
That's a really adult and mature response, by the way.
Let's set the record straight. There's a certain window when it warms up in the fall that we have to power wash the show barn, and that happened to be today. So I have been disconnected in my therapy power washing for the past few hours.
You went to bed at 6 o'clock last night? Didn't watch Sanity? Tucker?
7:30.
Yeah, you have been more than disconnected, sir. You were in a cocoon.
Well, let's talk about what's going on in the world.
Well, since you don't know, I'll start.
Oh, I have an idea. I have an opinion.
Our listeners, even though Dale doesn't realize this, do know that this is pre-recorded, but we waited till Thursday afternoon to do the current event part of our podcast so we could have as much up-to-date information as possible. Neither Joe Biden or Donald Trump have amassed 200. See, even the dogs are upset in your house.
They are upset.
Neither one of them have amassed 270 electoral votes. There's a lot of issues, and there's some states out, and I will try to briefly take you through what the hell the problem is. Alaska has not been called. It is going to go for Donald Trump and Republican, but it has not been called because Alaska is mostly a mail-in ballot because, you can't leave your igloo and get on your, wild bison and ride to town and turn in your vote, I guess. But it will go Trump. The problems are, first off, is Arizona. Fox News, who I now detest and hate and think are more liberal than CNN.
It's the best we have still. It's taken a poor turn.
It is not. There are some shows on there that are wonderful. It was consistently more liberal on election night than any other station, and I can tell you why. They are the only...
I believe that is an exaggeration.
No, it's not. They're the only one that is called the state of Arizona for Biden. The Associated Press, ABC, NBC, MSNBC. No one else has called the state of Arizona for Biden.
I believe
except
that
Fox
call.
News.
I believe that call from their poll people. I believe that was based off of statistics. I'm not saying it's right, and I hope to God it's wrong. But when they brought their analysts in that are in that war room trying to figure out what direction things are going, I truly believe they made that call off of statistical analysis.
And you don't think the other people have statistical analysis?
Fox did openly admit that they're using different methods rather than exit polling like most of the others.
Or they could just wait to count the votes instead of call it when there was only 46% in.
They could. I'm not disagreeing with that.
Yeah. Like the other networks have done.
That would be nice, but I don't believe it was made because they were politically biased. I don't agree with it, but I don't believe it was politically biased.
Mm-hmm. So anyway,
now Chris Wallace was involved with that. You know where I'm at on that. Remember when you told me he was a very bad person?
And I'm starting to believe there's a lot more than bad people at Fox. But anyway.
Go ahead. Continue.
Arizona votes have not been counted. There is still roughly 15% of the vote out, I think. And as of it stood this afternoon, I didn't even look at the Arizona vote, but it's very close. The last bunch of electoral votes that went in, Trump gained, I think, 11,000 votes in the last ballot dump.
He's definitely narrowed the gap. I don't doubt it'll continue to narrow, and I hope it flips, but it's got a long ways to go.
The other simple one to talk about, since we've talked about Alaska and Arizona, is North Carolina. North Carolina's ballots are in. Everything has been counted that was either sent in by mail before the polls closed, all the votes day of, all the absentee votes are counted. Trump is winning by 76,701 votes right now. They have a lovely little rule that says when you request a mail-in ballot, that until November 12th, those ballots can come out. They had 116,200 ballots that have not been returned. They may all come in. None of them may come in. Somebody might have used them as firewood starter. Who knows?
We would assume that some will come in, some won't. Ryan, do you know if those had to be postmarked by Election Day?
Yes, they did have to be that, but they give them till the 12th to reach there. But there is nobody, including the Biden camp, that thinks North Carolina is going to flip, that Trump will win it and its electoral votes. Then it gets a lot more twisted. Georgia is one of these lovely little states. They are still counting ballots. Again, right before I came on this podcast, Trump was winning by 12,764. The one thing about Georgia, they have been very transparent. They have given multiple news conferences a day, said exactly how many ballots are out, what type of ballots they are, what counties they are in. So I think they are trying to be as transparent as possible.
That would be contrasting to which other two states that are not very transparent.
Nevada and Pennsylvania. There's no transparency there. But
zero.
The Biden team has not, I don't think they think that they're going to win Georgia, but they're hoping. But they have never really said, oh, we think when all the votes get counted that we're going to win Georgia. Trump team still thinks that they will hold on to a slim and narrow lead there. Then you get to Pennsylvania, which is just a hot ass mess. I'm just going to be real honest with you. Trump had at one point almost over a 500,000 margin in his favor. Right before I got on here, it was 101,220. There are roughly 350,000 votes left. They won't tell us all what kind they are, where they're from. They say that the majority of them are mail-in ballots. Biden was winning that by 65%, I think.
I believe they said that he was consistently getting 70% on the mail-in ballots.
So will this flip? Will it not? Don't know. Before the election, Pennsylvania changed the rules to allow mail-in ballots to be counted after the polls closed. The Republican National Committee fought this not as hard as they probably should have, but they did fight it. They got turned down. They have decided that they are taking up that fight again. The Supreme Court has already told the Democrats and the Pennsylvania people to submit a written argument by close of business day today. Again, I don't know where this will go. I don't know what's going to happen. If the Supreme Court decides that the ballots had to be in by the polls closed on Election Day, Trump's probably going to win that state by a very, 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 very large margin. There's lots of people that say when they told everybody to go home on election night that, there's videos of coolers and all this other stuff going into the Philadelphia Counting Center. Nobody knows if that's right or not, people. I don't know.
My concern is here. I consider Philadelphia maybe not as bad as Chicago, but there is no question the corruption that we've been involved with here in Illinois.
Has been there twice fighting corruption. It is notoriously corrupt. There's no doubt.
And I have no reason to think it's not, especially when shit like that's going on and they're locking people out, not allowing the observers to come in. There's no logical reason not to allow them in.
That is the other problem, is they put up in every polling place, you're supposed to be allowed to have poll observers, poll watchers. One of the things that got ruled on today, because of coronavirus, they were making the poll watchers be 50 feet away and use binoculars. Well, that's not right. So they wanted them in 6 feet. The Trump team won that earlier this morning, so they got a court order and they went in there. Well, then a higher court rejected it. The vote counting stopped. So who knows where this is going to go?
But we do know that every bit of that, there's one reason, And I want to hear you say it, Ryan. There's one reason why they're doing this.
One reason they're doing what?
Why would they board up the windows and not allow observers in?
Oh, I am not saying that there is not some shady dealings going on there. I'm not saying that.
And it shouldn't be allowed to happen.
No, we are supposed to have free, fair, observed elections. That's why there are things as poll watchers. And, Democrats get them too. It's not like, it's just the Republicans get them. And absolutely, they should be allowed to watch that entire process. That's why they have them. The fact that they are trying to keep them from it, yes, I do not think that is good. I do not think that is right. And I do think that there is probably something sketchy going on there. But again, Trump is still winning right now. If he ends up losing that state, it's going to depend on what the total is. Because I'll go into my recount thing here in a minute, but let me finish with Nevada. Nevada is also notoriously known for a lot of corruption when it comes to elections and ballots, and especially in Las Vegas. Imagine that. I can't believe anything dirty goes on in Las Vegas. Nevada shut down and said, it's going to take us a while. They have given no information, very few ballot totals, and I am of the firm belief what they are trying to do is wait for one of these other states to be called for Biden and he gets over the 270 hump, and then the focus goes off them and maybe some of their not so legal tactics when it comes to elections are being viewed by the eyes of the world.
I appreciate that analysis. I think that is exactly right. And in my mind, that is very logical, Ryan. And I appreciate drawing that picture of what's happening there. And remember, a few weeks ago, I had brought out that some family friends had a ballot sent to their father that had been passed away for over 15 years. There's a lot of crap going on when you mass.
And they are a complete mail-in ballot state.
Registered. Yeah. Just it's a mess. And when we're talking, Ryan, how many vote difference today?
Right now, Joe is up 11,438, but there is also almost 30% of the ballots not counted.
Okay, let's address that. Every state dictates how they're going to count ballots, the equipment they use, the ballot they use, all of those things. And we'll talk about that here in a second. But it's interesting to me how inefficient some states can be at these things. And I fear.
Well, when you shut down because you don't want people watching you, it's real easy to be slow. I told you the morning after the election when they announced that they were not giving out any new information till Thursday, I told you what was happening. I didn't have to research it. I knew. They gave out one batch of ballots today, put a lid on it. They'll give out more tomorrow.
So with Nevada being in a gray area, that's what we're going to call it, gray. We don't know there's corruption taking place. Ryan and I do not have evidence stating this is exactly what's happening. I want everybody to understand that.
I don't know if there's any. I mean, the Trump team has filed multiple lawsuits in Nevada, Georgia, and Pennsylvania for many different things that some of them seem valid, some of them don't. But no, I don't have any evidence of it. I know that there is evidence that over years and years and years, Nevada has been known for having fraud and corruption in their elections. You can go back, you can research that.
As has Philadelphia.
So when they shut it down, that is just my belief. They shut it down because they don't want the eyes of the world on them.
So that means we have two states, Pennsylvania and Nevada, that we both agree we're going to call gray. We have no absolute evidence, but a lot of arrows pointing in a direction that you think there's no other logical explanation.
Right. Wisconsin, I just want to put out a little bit of this myth because there was all this stuff going around that 101% of the people voted. Wisconsin is a state that you can register the day of the election and vote. As of November 1st, 2020, the number of people that voted in the election, it was 89% turnout. Is that high of the registered voters?
Of the registered
Is that high?
Yes.
Absolutely. That is extremely high. But that was also November 1st's number, not the second or third.
And it is a high number, but it's not impossible.
Trump campaign has asked for a recount. I also want to point out, though, that Hillary asked for a recount in Wisconsin in 2016 and got one. Now, this brings us to recounts. I have no problem that if the recount laws that are set in those states If it's in those parameters, go for it. Absolutely. Things might shift. I would say that, like, Wisconsin is, I think, the tightest, and it's like 20,000 votes. I do not think that I can remember any substantial switch in an election because of a recount, where one person was declared the winner, and when they went to recount, it was different, unless it was like totals of 500 or less.
And we can talk about the Bush versus Gore one here shortly.
But the Supreme Court decided that.
On your recount, realize that I am in a complete agreement. I don't believe the numbers, unless there's a drastic mistake made, and we hope there's never one of those. The numbers aren't going to fluctuate much. However, I think there is more room for error in making mistakes because of the rules that have changed with COVID. And I'm not just...
And almost every state changed with COVID. So maybe there is. I don't know. But I'm just saying, up until this election, in recounts, unless it was a minuscule margin total, very few times has the winner ever changed.
Correct. And I believe Wisconsin, if it's in every state's different. Wisconsin, I believe if it is the vote count is within 1%, it is almost, it's what they call an automatic recount. You just do it.
I think there will be recounts in lots of these states, and that's fine. What people don't realize is in almost every election year, whether it's president or otherwise, recounts are asked for. Sometimes they're automatic. Sometimes people ask for them, go to court to get them recounted. That happens multiple times, multiple places all over. Just because you're hearing about it now, I don't want you to think that that's something that doesn't happen a lot, because it does. It doesn't change things many times.
I think we should move into some of those crazy examples. You already brought up the 101% in Wisconsin, and there's other ones. I sent Ryan a Facebook message that I received, I don't know how many times, about Trump putting a sting in place that we're going to watermark all the official ballots in A, B, and C states. And when they come in, they can check those watermarks, and they're going to prove that the Democrats stacked the election. All of that is absolute total crap. And if you use any common sense, the states develop their own ballots, even the townships. And
in some states, the local people develop their own ballots.
Yes. If that doesn't come out of the White House, I promise you.
It's not federally mandated.
Guys, when you get that, I know most of you listening want Trump in the White House. I understand that. We're grasping at straws, but weed through some of this with some common sense. And I encourage you to go do just a little bit of research. It took me 30 seconds on the Wisconsin situation where they said 101% of the votes came in compared to registered voters. And you go back, they compared it to 2018, not 2020. And as Ryan mentioned, you can register up until the day of the election. So I really do want to encourage you to think for yourself and do some of that research. Ryan and I were talking earlier a little bit about voter verification. It's concerned me, not just in this election, but just about every election. And I'm not aware of what it is in every state. And now that we have mail-in ballots and sometimes mass ballots being mailed out to every registered voter, like you have in Nevada, it's very, very concerning to me. When I go to vote in person in the state of Illinois, I simply give them my name. They pull my voter ballot out or verification that has my signature on it, and I'm to sign right below the signature that was on my voter registration card. I can see the signature that's sitting there and try to imitate it if I so chose. No ID, no verification. The person at the polling place, I have no idea who that is. I don't think they know who I am. It's concerning to me that it's that simple. Ryan says you have to do what in the state of Texas?
You have to present an ID at state of Texas.
And I'm much more in favor. I think that just seems logical. You know what, Ryan? I want to go a step further. Not only present an ID. In the livestock world, we have the hot shots and little electrical prods. I think if you truly want to vote, you should have to prove that you want to vote. A small shock when you come to vote. And you know what? Only the people that really want to vote are going to do it. I think that we have to sort it somehow. And that's crap. They just go line up for whatever. No, we need some skin in the game.
Oh, God, that's hilarious.
You don't think that would work? Don't think that would help?
I do.
All right, how about an IQ test?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I'm all in favor of a real simple, like 10-question one at the door. Real simple.
Again, Dale, in his bubble.
No, I don't believe every American should vote.
That's great.
I have come No, I've come to the conclusion that there's a portion of our population that's ignorant.
Thank you, Dale. Oh, my.
I don't want to live by their decisions.
Clearly. I think this is going to turn ugly. I'm not a favor of it turning ugly.
It's gonna.
If it does turn ugly, which I'm afraid it's going to, I do hope that it will make for election reform, because while I don't understand why there are some things that are not mandated by the federal government when it comes to elections, not all things, but some things, like you have to present an ID.
An IQ test.
Like, I think that's something that should be in all state. I know it can't all come by the federal government. I do think there needs to be some election reform. But I also want to say that by and large, and I know we're all worked up and we're all on pins and needles, by and large, our elections do not have a great deal of fraud that changes the winners. This year may be different because all the rules were changed because of Rona, all this other stuff.
Statistically, it's about impossible to come up with an election that's close.
And like I said, lots of things are different this time because of Rona. And it's all, but before this, I am not going to tell you that I don't believe that there has not been fraud in elections. There has. But the percentage was so small and it really didn't change things. Again, I may be proved wrong this time. My fear is that in the next little bit, somebody's going to get to 270, whether it's Biden. And if it is Biden, because he's
no, don't pretend you believe it will be Biden.
I do think it will be Biden. I do think he will. The networks and the press, when the votes come in, that they will call one of these states for him, and they will have the right to, because all the votes will be in, and he will end up winning one of those states, and they will call it for Biden. And when they do, I do not think Trump will concede. I think he will take this to the Supreme Court. And if it is something along the lines that where you're counting ballots that came in after Election Day, something like that, I can go there, I guess. I have no problem saying that if you couldn't get your ballot in before the polls closed on Election Day, it probably shouldn't need to be counted because you evidently weren't responsible enough.
They wouldn't have been willing to take that electric shock or pass an IQ test if that's the case.
You are probably right on that. But my fear is that he's not going to concede, and this is going to go to the courts. And for those of you that followed me on Facebook, on Election Eve, I put up a big post, and everybody knows how much I love Trump, and I think he is the right man for this job. And I think that I truly believe that he needs to be president. I wanted a clear and decisive winner at the ballot box, and for this not to be decided in the Supreme Court, and that's where it's headed. You know, we've been down that road once before, Bush versus Gore 20 years ago, and it was bad, and it was bad for the country, and a lot of y'all probably don't remember it, and politics wasn't nearly as big a deal because there hadn't been a figure like Donald Trump back then. So not nearly as many people followed it. It was absolutely terrible for this country. And at that time, that was kind of the only thing that was really going wrong in America. We didn't have a pandemic. We hadn't had months and months of riots and looting, a racial divide that is probably as high now as it's ever been. So you add this to it, and I am very fearful for where we're going to go. And I will say, as a selfish point on Trump, yes, I want him to be the president. By God, I want him to be the president. If he handles this the way that I am afraid he will, he has 3 children that all have a very bright future on the political stage in the upcoming years. I mean, it could go as far as 20 to 40 years because they're that young. He will ruin the chances for all 3 of them if he handles this wrong.
Just go ahead and get right to where you think it needs to be. How should he handle it?
I think that if it gets to 270 and we get to December 13th, because the Electoral College meets on December 14th, he needs to concede. If the Supreme Court things aren't working out and all that, he needs to concede. If he has lost the Electoral College, they cannot prove fraud in any of these things.
The disagreement that I'm going to come in, and I appreciate And I'd love to argue with you. That's one of my favorite things to do. But I appreciate your sincerity, and I appreciate you thinking of the bigger picture and the divided country. And everything you've talked about is correct. And I don't know that the Gore versus Bush was that bad, but I went through and researched that a little bit today. And we were talking 600 votes down to 327 votes. Ultimately, the Supreme Court, in a 4-3 decision in the Florida Supreme Court, they decided to continue counting manually the ballots. And what they were doing manually is they were trying to figure out voter intent, which could be an overvote where they marked two candidates trying to decide between the two which one they meant, undervote where they may have voted for the president or other people and not the president. And then we have the hanging chads that kind of works its way into there. So with this Bush versus Gore, it ends up in the Supreme Court, as Ryan had mentioned. And Bush filed a suit in the U.S. Supreme Court. It ended up a 5-4 decision to stop the manual recount. At that point, the Supreme Court cited standards of the fact that that in their mind, the manual recount violated equal protection clause of the U.S. Constitution is what they cited. I have no idea how deep that goes. I assume it's real. It's part of it. They decided on it. There's Supreme Court. That's law. They took heavy criticism from the Democrats. I don't remember it maybe as well as I should. And I know it wasn't popular with the Democrats, but there wasn't as much civil unrest as I think there will be if this happens now. Gore on December 13th conceded. While I strongly disagree with the courts, I will accept it. And that's kind of what Ryan's talking about here, is that maybe Trump should come forward and do as such. I cannot accept that because we talk about fraud in the election. I think there's been fraud for 4 years against Trump from the mainstream media, not covering things fairly, from the Russia collusion and the dossier that Hillary Clinton paid for, spying on the Trump campaign. I think that the Democrats have been playing so far out of bounds for so long. I'm going to probably disagree with Ryan a little bit. I don't want him to concede. I would like the fact that we've got things that I believe are in the gray area in Nevada, the gray area in Pennsylvania. I would like that to be fully worked out and I don't think they can do it by December 14th, that it's going to go to the Supreme Court. And I don't want to overturn the election that the legal ballots went one direction, but I can't accept any longer us playing by the rules, using the moral high ground when the other side isn't and they're getting away with too much crap. I'm going to just say I'm okay with it going to the Supreme Court. And if it does go to the Supreme Court, Ryan says it needs to be done legally. If the Supreme Court rules on it, that is legal. Will it cause civil unrest? Absolutely. But I am not willing to give up the White House, and now the Senate's in question. I'm not willing to give up everything. And we talk about Trump's children. I'm concerned about my children if we stack the Supreme Court, if we bring Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. into the Senate, if we continue to try to strangle small businesses with higher taxes, if we continue to give more and more handouts and work towards more of a socialistic society, that, in my opinion, just my opinion, handcuffs my children's ability to succeed through hard work and putting their best foot forward. So I'm willing to go to the Supreme Court. I'm willing to do anything within the legal boundaries to hold those in Pennsylvania and Nevada accountable. And I'm going to accept civil unrest to get what's right.
The Bush versus Gore deal got to the Supreme Court before the Electoral College met, because they fast track things like this because they know it's
and if that would be the idea,
and that will happen. That there's no doubt that will happen. I am saying when it comes down to the day that the electors are supposed to meet, he has not got the 270 votes, and he can't prove any of these things that we think might very well be possibilities that it's changed the Electoral College vote. If on the day before the Electoral College meets, and this stuff is not, if it's not currently in the Supreme Court and they're waiting on a decision, he needs to concede.
Yeah, if the Supreme Court's already made their decisions, absolutely. But I certainly don't object to it going to the Supreme Court. Knowing
I don't object for any of that.
Then we're on the same page here.
I don't object on any of that. He can take it there. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be bloody. But he's already decided. If you would have listened to him for months beforehand, He said he was going to do this if he had to.
I wish that we didn't have to.
And I do think that he has been pushed in this. And the one thing on fraud and corruption that I am going to say, and I told Dale this the morning after the election, the true fraud and corruption has been the mainstream media villainizing, criticizing, and lying about Donald Trump for over 5 years now. And even though that is legal because it is freedom of speech, freedom of the press, that is the true fraud and corruption.
And it may be legal, but that is worse than anything that I've seen in recent history.
I'm not saying you're not right.
Worst.
We hold these freedoms to be self-evident. That's one of them. You're talking about...
Throw social media right in
You're
there.
talking about all this stuff that you worried that if the Senate goes this way and what the Biden... Those are your freedoms and the Constitution and all this other stuff that you think's in jeopardy. You can't just have one part of it.
Well, what I'm saying is I'm willing to take the civil unrest. I'm willing to use every legal channel possible to hold the White House.
That's great. I want him in there. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if he's exasperated all of these things and he still does not have whatever.
No, I absolutely agree
He
with
needs
that.
to concede before the Electoral College meets.
As long as everything legally has been worked through, no chance, done, it's over. Absolutely. No, you can't not do that. You have
If you
to
listen to some people inside the White House, they don't think he's going to, which is my fear. But here we are. But the Senate right now is at 48-48. And the reason that it's at 48-48 is because there are two independents. One is Bernie. I don't know who the other one is. They caucus with the Democrats. So it's actually 46 Democrats, 2 independents, 48 Republicans. There are 4 races that are left outstanding. One is Alaska. It will go Republican, so they will get to 49. One is in North Carolina. Again, North Carolina is just waiting on these possible 116,200 votes to come out. If that, no one thinks that will change, and that will also go to the Republicans, so they will be at 50. The Hickey and the Senate are, the other 2 races are both in Georgia. Georgia, as we said, talked about election laws being different everywhere. Georgia, first off, allows for what they call a jungle primary, where it's not just one Republican or one Democrat. Anybody that wants to run can get up there and do it. One of those races had 13 candidates. The 2 that are going to a runoff in January is the incumbent senator. Her name is Loeffler. She's a Republican. I do not remember the other gentleman's name. The person that was third was Representative Doug Collins. He is a Republican. If you would have put Loeffler and Doug Collins' votes together as one Republican, they would have had over 60% of the vote. That will all change when it's one-on-one. I get that. But that one's definitely going to runoff. The other Senate seat in Georgia, there was only 2 people in it, but you have to get above 50% of the vote to not automatically make it a runoff in the first week of January. Right now, the Republican is winning, but he has 50.0% of the vote. So as these votes trickle in Georgia, if he gets below 50% of the vote, that one will go into a runoff again. So both of the Georgia Senate seats could be up for grabs the first weekend in January. I can't imagine the amount of money. And it's going to be...
It'll be obscene.
It's going to be something. And so, again, I firmly believe that the Republicans will have 50 without the Georgias. But if somehow both of those Senate seats go into a runoff and the Democrats won both of those, it would be 50-50, and whoever's vice president would break the ties.
So just so everybody understands, and we've gone through this before, if they hold the Senate, they can stack the courts. They can
if the Democrats get the Senate, the only way the Democrats can get the Senate is if they lose both Georgia seats. If both Georgia seats go to a runoff, Democrats have to beat both of them, and then Biden has to take the White House too, and Kamala would beat the tie.
The bottom line is if the Republicans give up the White House and Biden is in the White House, our only savior is holding the Senate to keep things somewhat in check.
That's right.
That's what Ryan and I are trying to get to. And Ryan, one last thing in current events before we go on to a great, almost current event type topic. Do you know what disappeared as of Tuesday, yesterday, today? And the news is not in your face blaring at you?
Coronavirus.
It's gone. It's gone. It is gone. That's great.
And it's going to be something. And then another thing, a lot of people have asked about a Beyond the Circus. Dale and I will do a Beyond the Circus about the selection, but until somebody at least gets to 270 and all these states get called, that we don't have as much, and we need these lawsuits to kind of get a little further, so it'll probably be next week. But we will do one, but we first think that all the states need to be called, so we know where we're at.
Excellent. Let's move on to our topic.
Yay!
Ryan and I have discussed bringing on a few sponsors, and we're fortunate today to bring a sponsor on for our main topic that I have had personal experience with, Cowpokes Workin' Western, located in Anderson, Indiana. My family and I, it's a main stop for us at the North American International, and to my surprise, Cowpokes Workin' Western will be at the North American this year. They will be at a new location in West Hall Meeting Rooms W5 through W10, but same great experience. Cowpokes is family-owned by Jeff and Lynette Boone. They're one of the largest family-owned Western retailers in the state of Indiana, featuring over 7,000 pairs of boots and 9,000 pairs of denim, along with apparel for the whole family. I strongly encourage you to stop in while at the North American and visit Cowpokes Workin' Western. If you're unable to attend the North American, shop online at cowpokesonline.com. Shipping is free with any purchase over $75. Thank you, Cowpokes, for your sponsorship of today's main topic. This week, we're fortunate to welcome Warren Beeler into the ring. Warren comes to us from Caneyville, Kentucky. Warren received a Bachelor's of Animal Science from Western Kentucky University, is a former field representative for the Yorkshire and Hampshire breeds of swine. Warren spent 16 years in the Kentucky Department of Agriculture as marketing specialist, director of shows and fairs, director, animal marketing division, and more recently, director of agricultural policy. Today, Warren is a retired farmer, pawpaw to 2 granddaughters that he very much enjoys. He has been a volunteer the past several years as a general superintendent for the North American International Livestock Exposition. I have fond memories of Warren sorting hogs across the country and the mainstay at the Kentucky State Fair and the North American International. Warren, we welcome you to Beyond the Ring.
Well, thank you, Dale. I'm very, very much pleased to be on here and particularly share a little bit. We feel so fortunate to have a North American, and even though it's going to be a little different this year. So thank you for having me.
No problem. And I know you've got a busy schedule. I believe we're heading to North American today. But as we move into this, I'd like to express my personal appreciation to you and all involved at the North American for allowing and making this event happen in 2020. I understand that it's been a monster of an undertaking, and it would be sad if that level of commitment were to go unnoticed. I encourage everyone that attends a North American, find a staff member, find Warren, find somebody, express your appreciation, because it's a battle to pull these off right now, but they're getting the job done. There's no question there's going to be some changes, and Warren will visit with us a little bit about that today. These are what I call minor inconveniences to get these youth in the show ring and others into the show ring, and we simply are gonna accept those and go through those as best we can. Warren, you've been involved in the livestock show stock industry most of your life. How do you think the industry is handling adjusting to what we're dealing with right now with the COVID pandemic?
Well, I think we've had to kind of teach some of our leadership, and particularly the health people, that we are responsible. On the farm and in agriculture, we've been social distancing all our life, and we're a little different crew. And I think we've just adjusted. And now you've got to wear the mask, you've got to wash your hands, you got to try to stay away from people, and all those things I think have done. We went through our state fair, which was a junior show only, exhibitors only, and came out on the other end with absolutely no issues whatsoever. So I don't have any doubt in my mind that we can do it and do it very successfully.
That is encouraging, the fact that you made it through the Kentucky State Fair with similar protocols, I'm assuming. And Ryan has had a chance to judge all over the country, and it's interesting, and I've been out a little bit as well. It's interesting how the protocols and the implementation of shows and how they're regulated from one state to another, there's a lot of variation. But when you have one the size of the North American, and we'll talk about this later as well, our listeners need to understand, and those stock show families that are preparing to go to the North American, the staff there at the North Americans put a protocol in place that's been approved by the health department that it's not completely up to the staff and those at the North American how this is going to be implemented, whether you wear a face mask or not. These things are very much controlled by the health department, and we really need to implement whatever they so choose just so we can have this show. And Ryan, can you bring us in just some differences that you see throughout the country?
Really depends on the size of the show and what state you're in. And so, again, I heard nothing but good things about the Kentucky State Fair. As Mr. Beeler said, they came through that with flying colors. It was very, very positive. And I think the best thing that we can all do, just like we did for the American Royal, is absolutely adhere to whatever guidelines that the North American and its staff and volunteers give us as exhibitors, and do what's asked of us, because they are one of the few that are actually having a show of this size for us this year in 2020. And so by all means, whatever we have to do to allow this show to happen, we're just going to do it. And I think we should do it with a smile.
Excellent, Ryan. And Warren, what are your thoughts with some of those changes that we might see? Let's try to enlighten some of those families that are heading to North American. It may not be the same as it's always been in the past. What should we expect?
Well, I think what you find, our deal, our protocol is a little different. The State Fair Board runs our fairgrounds, and they're under the tourism cabinet. And so everything we've had to get approved has had to go all the way to the governor's office and then back down through the health department. So we're just very fortunate, I think, to have one at all. But first thing you're going to do is when you drive in, you're going to go in the old Executive Inn, and right there where the front gate is, you're going to the Executive Inn lot, and there's where everything will be checked. Everybody will have to sign a waiver on COVID-19. Everybody's got to wear a mask. This year we have a lot of things we don't have. Dale and Ryan, we no rodeo this year, no mule show, no alpacas or llamas shows. We got no sorting or cutting show in the quarter horse deal. The 4-H national judging contest. We do have junior college and senior college, but not 4-H. No dairy goat show. No country store except for, Cowpokes and Sullivan's and some of those vendors who directly service the show people with supplies. We're limited on how many meetings we can have. Usually we got every room full of meetings with associations and stuff, and that's very limited. No spectators, only exhibitors only. No barnyard where you see your champions and those things. No wool show, no school tours. We have no bleachers, and I argued against this, but I lost. No bleachers in the sheep show and the unlimited seating in Freedom Hall and Broadbent. I think we can regulate social distancing in bleachers better than we can standing around the ring. So we'll see how that works.
I think that's maybe just a little bit of when you're going through the tourism and the governor's office, they don't understand the mechanics of the show. But I just got off the phone a few days ago with the Arizona National, and they had the same argument. They are going to take their bleachers out as requested. But I'm with you, Warren. I think it's going to be more difficult to enforce that than what it would be in the bleachers.
No doubt it's going to be more difficult. We're all dealing with people that probably haven't been to many shows, but just like Mr. Beeler said, it would be much easier and much simpler to deal with that with there being bleachers. And so I think with the limited seating in Freedom Hall, it'll be a lot easier for the cattle people to do that than it's going to be in the other barns. And that is unfortunate. But once again, you just got to do what you got to do to have a show.
Right. To be honest with you, I think we need more bleachers instead of none, and then we could really scatter people out, or maybe a little bigger ring and some of those things. But that's where we're at, and that's what we had to do to have a show. So we're typically for the North American at 22,000 entries under normal conditions. This year we're at 16,500, which we consider to be really good for under the circumstances. Attendance, Dale and Ryan, attendance will be limited to 2,900 a day. Now, I don't know how they're going to do that. And typically for the total show, 50,000 compared to 150,000 we usually have. It's going to be different, but we're still going to have the green shavings. We're still going to, people love coming to the North American. It's a family show. We just absolutely love having people. I think there's something about the green shavings. I see them all the time picking up little baggies full of green shavings to take home as a souvenir. And I told them, don't pick up those nasty shavings. We got a whole pile around back here. I can get you all you want. So I don't know. We're excited to have it. We're so thankful. We want everybody to come, but we got to understand, just like Ryan, you all said, the rules are the rules, and we have to act and accordingly, or we're going to be watched, I'm sure.
And Warren, I had a family call me and ask some questions about it, and I actually directed them just to the office there at the North American, and I'm sure they're getting bombarded with phone calls, but every single time I've called, they've picked up the phone and answered those questions. They had a question. I think they were coming from a state that the positivity rate was really, really close to going out of bounds, and they were informed that, and this was several weeks ago, trying to plan a little bit ahead, I guess, that if they were to self-quarantine, I believe it was 14 days prior to leaving, that they could sign forms saying, hey, we have not been exposed. We could still get in. Is there validity to that, or where is that?
That's what they're going to, what you got people from California coming that left a week ago, so they're going to pull them over in the old Executive Inn lot there across from the Crown Plaza at the front gate. There's only one gate going to be open too, and that's the front gate. That's gate 1. And they're going to ask them a bunch of questions, and the answer is no, I have not been exposed. I have been basically isolated on the farm or at home or whatever, and that they would go ahead with it.
And a lot of these people that are coming, they are isolated out on the farm. They're with their family members, and that's it. We talk about how our life changes on a daily basis here with the pandemic, and there are days you wouldn't know any different because we just aren't going anywhere, or we just don't generally go anywhere. And it's interesting how it affects everybody.
Yeah, agriculture didn't shut down. As a matter of fact, I think probably the pandemic has shined a light on agriculture, just how essential it is when it comes down to it. When the shelves got a little empty, people started to take notice. And so, agriculture, we've been social distancing all our life. We don't think of it. That's normal for us.
And you mentioned something earlier that Ryan and I hold pretty close to our heart, those judging contests. And I know you'd always had plans for the senior college, but it was kind of questionable on the junior college level, but you were able to get that back in. And I wanted our listeners to know, I believe on the 4-H national contest, that was more through extension in the 4-H. It wasn't necessarily as much you guys saying, hey, we don't have room, but they were having difficulties with their volunteers and so forth.
That was a 4-H decision. That wasn't our decision. We would have loved to have them. Those kids work so hard all year. All of us are products of that particular program. And, how important it is. I've always said we don't teach any lessons at the North American, the national contest. We put out classes you can place and talk and let the good kids win. And that's it. We have been pulling hogs from the show and trying to keep them going. And this year we're going to bring them from the farm since we don't need as many. And we're moving the junior college from Wednesday to Tuesday. So we go Monday, Tuesday, senior college, junior college. Scott Greiner told me that they had normally have 30 teams. They've got 19 teams, senior college this year. And I haven't heard junior college.
And I believe the junior college is a touchdown. And Ryan, I believe you're an official this year in the senior college. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I am an official for the senior college contest. And again, as Mr. Beeler said, we're all products of that lovely tradition and excited about that, and excited that the kids that, you only get 1 year of eligibility, whether you're a senior college member or a junior college member. And so very thankful and very appreciative that the North American is allowing those kids to have that contest this year. And again, it's going to look different. Scott Greiner's been on our podcast before, and because I am an official and he is in charge, we've been talking about how the differences that are going to be there. But again, I think at this point, the judging contests have been hit probably harder than the actual livestock shows. And so I think everybody's just so grateful and thankful that we're going to get to have that event, that everybody's going to be very, very cooperative. And, saying in terms of the number of teams that are down, a lot of that is because I know from many of my friends that are coaches, a lot of their schools aren't allowing them to travel. And it's not that they don't want to be there, but they're just not allowing them to go. And that is unfortunate, but very, very thankful and very, very appreciative that the ones that can go are going to get to have that unique experience there by having the judging contest at the North American.
And Warren, and we do appreciate it. And I can't even imagine what the undertaking has been to get this all approved and to jump into this with a little bit different face on the North American. When you talk about some of the vendors, Sullivan's, I don't know what other show supplies, but I know Cowpokes, as we talked about here earlier, as one of our sponsors. I was surprised that they were coming. Actually, never thought about the fact that we do have to bring some of those that supply the stock show families. So I assume, Warren, that's kind of what it's limited to.
Completely, and then the food courts actually will be moved outside, and so you're typically there in the north wing where we have the big food court. It will be moved out kind of out in front of that over towards the west hall. We'll have a couple different deals. So it's going to look different, but it's still going to be the North American. We're anxious to get folks in, and we can pull this off. I don't have any doubt in my mind about it.
I appreciate that confidence. I think the fact he went through the Kentucky State Fair with, I'm assuming, a very similar protocol, just on a smaller scale.
Yeah, we started this battle. To be honest with you, I was working for the governor until he fired me in September, and I wasn't of the right party, and political things happen. But the battle started when we were supposed to have the Summer Spectacular Hog Show and the Hereford Junior National there at the fairgrounds, and so the governor had allowed horse shows, but not livestock shows, and they didn't understand, how things work, and so we battled and we lost those two, and they went other places and still had them, which is wonderful. But I think that helped us open the door to have some degree of state fair, and then with the success of the state fair, just kind of maybe led us into this deal. But it's been a fight. When some of our poultry processing plants got the virus, we were having to fight to keep them open, and so it hasn't been easy, but it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. I've watched so many. Now I'm probably on the other day I was talking to somebody, and they said, Beeler, you judged me, you judged my daughter, now you're judging her daughter. And so I've watched generations of kids come up through the junior livestock deal. And it's not about livestock as much as it's about developing young people that are responsible and very capable. And once you see them become parents, then you know what that it's worked. It's worked really well. That's why having the hog show at the North American, having all the junior shows, and we were limited at the state fair just to junior shows. So we didn't have an open show at the state fair. So we're lucky to have both here at the North American, and it's going to work. We're going to get it done.
No, that's impressive, because it seemed like, and Ryan has stood up for those open shows probably as much as anybody, but it seems like that's the first thing that we kind of throw to the side to bring numbers down. And the fact that you're having, I mean, if I rewind the clock a few months, I would have said, Warren, I don't know how you're going to get the health department and tourism and all those guys to sign off on this, but you guys found a pathway, and the open shows there, the necessary vendors to keep the stock show families supplied are there. It's pretty exciting from my standpoint that we are not going to miss a North American in 2020. And that's commendable on your guys's. You talked about some changes in terms of where the animals are located. I'm assuming we had to shift that up for various reasons, but so we know the goats and the sheep, I believe, and I'm not even sure about the hogs, Warren. Are they going to be in a different area?
Yeah, we don't have access to South Wing C. South Wing C is still set up as basically a triage hospital for and there's nobody there, but it's off limits. So all we've got in South Wing is A and B, and so we'll have basically where the country store is. We'll have that available for livestock too, and then where the idea is to try to scatter people out and do as much as we can. For the dairy show and the beef show, we're going to pre-bed, and that way people don't have to stand in line at Feeder Supply for 2 hours to get their stuff. We'll have that already done, and then we're going to disinfect between changeovers. We will clean up between dairy beef, but not from the first round of beef to the second round of beef. We're just going to disinfect. And most of the things will be in the same general area, but we're trying to scatter stuff out so that we can pass the test.
Like we've said, and like you've stated, it's going to look a little different. But if all that we are really having to do here is to wear a mask and try to spread out social distancing when we can, and there's only going to be one gate, and we might be stalled somewhere that we haven't been stalled before. That is very, very minimal changes in a year that has seen drastic and devastating changes to the livestock show. So again, for all of you that are going to this show, and that me included, please find these people that have made this possible, thank them, show them your appreciation, and do what is asked of you. Because I do not think, unless you have talked to these people at the American Royal and the North American like Dale and I have, you have any idea how difficult it has been and the hoops that these people have gone through to not only let these juniors showcase their stock, they are going to have open shows and they are going to have judging contests for those collegiate kids. And so again, I know how appreciative I am, but I think that the masses need to show that to y'all as well.
No, exactly, Ryan. And Warren, I can't express our appreciation. And I hope, guys, if there's one thing we can get across, and it's great to get this information from Warren on what differences is going to be there at the North American this year in terms of those minor inconveniences. But I think we need to look at maybe the American Royal and really change the show rings around a little bit, similar to what we're doing here at Louisville. They asked you to wear a mask in Glen Allen there at the American Royal, had to get on the microphone and encourage that a little more. Let's make it a little bit easier on the North American staff, and knowing that there's going to be health officials monitoring things. And even if you're not as concerned, you say, well, the show's going on, they're not going to cancel it. Well, they can. We always hope that they wouldn't. We hope that the exhibitors comply and the families comply with what the protocols are. But let's look a little further down the road. If we do not comply at the North American and cooperate with some of these minor changes that Warren and Ryan have brought out, what about the next show? What are the odds that next show, or those staff members of that next show, let's say Arizona National, they're planning to have their show. They're still obviously dealing with rising COVID numbers. They're still having to work with the governor's office. If information gets back to them that none of these exhibitors are complying, or not enough of them are complying, and it's difficult at the North American, it's harder for them to go to bat for you. Warren, does that make sense to you?
I think basically we're on a trial basis here in terms of everything about this virus makes everything brand new again. And we have to prove that we can wear a mask, and we can social distance. We can wash our hands. We can do what, so yeah, we got to abide by the rules. If we don't, we got little or no chance of, and I mean, I don't think some of those folks that are regulatory type folks, they love their power. So we just need to be careful.
When like Mr. Baylor and Dale just said, we got through the American Royal. It wasn't without challenges, and people were not as cooperative as they needed to be. And so that was kind of the first big test. The North American will be the second one, and we need to come through that test a lot better than we did at the American Royal in terms of the exhibitors being cooperative in what's asked of us, because just like both of y'all have stated, these are the test runs to see not only if shows like Arizona National get to happen and what we have to do, but every time that I go out and I judge these shows every weekend, I try to get this message across. If the shows like the American Royal and the North American can't happen, eventually there will be no reason to have these jackpot shows. Because if you can't end up at one of those, there's no sense in doing this. So you may not think it affects things, but I promise you it affects way more than you will ever understand. So please, just wear your mask, do what's asked of you, and again, do it with a smile.
This Warren, I do think people need to understand that it's much, much easier not to have shows than it is to have shows. And so we are in a situation where we're so fortunate in a state where we were just locked down completely for a while to be able to pull this thing off. So I'm gonna be after the announcers at every barn to stay after folks, and I'm not bashful about saying something if I need to, but we want them to want to do it because they understand that's what it takes to continue.
That is exactly right. I echo what Ryan and Warren are talking about there, and in wanting to do it, guys. You've so many of you have touched base with Ryan and I, and on social media that you'll do anything for these shows to happen. Let's prove that. Let's go ahead and put our best foot forward and want to do this and do things right. So Warren and those on the microphones do not have to continually remind us. Let's get them face masks up. Let's work on social distancing. Let's get this done right and set an example. If we can set that example and use this North American as an example, it makes it so much easier as we move forward into the others. And as I think about the summer jackpot shows where we're showing off the trailer and there's definitely no scales at some of the shows where we adjusted all those things. And from a positive standpoint, I didn't hear any exhibitors complaining about anything. But then we get to one of the bigger shows. I think we just expect it to be exactly like it was the previous year. And that's not going to happen. We're still having a show. The green shavings are there. And I'm very, very thankful for all those things. But let's go the extra mile just as they did. And I promise you it's easier on our end than what's been for the staff and those involved with making sure Louisville gets to happen this year. Let's do our part without question. We've talked about one other thing I wanted to bring up. This stock show industry is truly an industry, a business that it touches and affects so many lives, not just the lives of those young people that are going into the show ring and using that as an educational building tool. But I was visiting with one of my friends that is in the show weather business on the sheep side, and he brought to light and reminded me that, hey, his livelihood and many other livelihoods, those involved in the fitting and supply industry, those involved at Cowpokes, it touches so many different businesses and affects so many lives. The least we can do as exhibitors is to suck it up just a little bit and deal with a few minor inconveniences to make this happen.
We're kind of serving as an example for shows to come. I mean, if we can pull it off and be very successful with it, then the Denvers and the Fort Worths and some of these others have a reason to fight for their shows and get it back on track. You're talking about the scope of the junior livestock deal. I did a talk a few years ago on the basically the volume and the money in the show pig industry, and that was a few years ago. It's a little bigger than that now, but all the things we pulled together, it's $1 billion industry on 1% of the hogs. And so it is huge. It is huge when you think about trailers and bedding and feed and pigs and all the things it takes to pull this thing off. It's a huge industry within the swine industry. So, and it's the same for all species when it comes down to it.
Exactly. And I think we forget about that sometimes. And it's become its own industry for real. And a lot of times we say, well, it's just a show or it's not the real world. It's become the real world because it is an industry. And it's great that we can acknowledge that, and hopefully it opens the eyes of some of those others. And I'm going to go on the positive note and say these exhibitors there are going to cooperate, and it's going to be a great example, Warren. I feel good about it.
We're probably still in the middle of this thing. I mean, I don't see any big light at the end of the tunnel. I'm hoping for a vaccine. You know what? It reminds me of being an old hog man. It reminds me of TGE. We had a disease where we couldn't treat it. We couldn't vaccinate for it. We just had to live with it for a while. But now I think we may have another year of this thing. And so what we do now is going to be a direct reflection on what we're able or incapable of doing next year.
Absolutely. And Warren and Ryan, I appreciate you guys jumping on today and discussing some of the differences and some of the changes. And I encourage everyone, if they have questions, touch base with the North American. They're good about answering that phone. And I think it's going to go extremely, extremely well. The example is going to be set, and we're going to continue to move forward. Warren, we thank you very much for jumping on today. Ryan, thank you.
I thank you, Dale and Ryan, for the exposure for the North American. All I can say is put your mask on and come on. We're gonna have a good one.
Ryan, we're moving on to question and answer. And I would like to thank Popejoy Livestock Transportation once again for sponsoring question and answer this week. Steve and Sarah Popejoy are there to provide a positive experience and get animals from point A to B as healthy and as safe as possible. I have used them for several years, and I strongly, strongly encourage you to consider using Pope Joy Livestock Transportation. You can find them on Facebook for contact and hauling information. Ryan, we have question and answer. Are you ready?
As ready as I'm ever going to be for this little section.
Chris, Christy, Barry King, I believe husband and wife, I'm assuming. Hey guys, we're in Mississippi, which is 24 hours straight drive away from Arizona National. How do you transport animals? We exhibit goats and lambs that far away and keep them fresh for the show. We'd eventually like to exhibit there, but are concerned about transportation of animals and keeping them show ready. Do you have any advice?
My advice is to find a place to lay over.
That would be the common theme, I believe, especially on the cattle side and probably on the lamb and goat side.
I don't care what species it is. That long a haul, you need to find a place to lay over.
I've gone a little bit different, and we've gone to Arizona National and Cow Palace. What I have found, and again, it's different depending on what type of trailer you're hauling in, what species you're hauling. And for me, and I'm only going to speak on the goat side on this one specifically because I can remember taking cattle to the National Western and hauling hogs everywhere. And I think laying over is almost an absolute. We have noticed, at least with the management procedures that we implement, if we can get from point A to B as quick as possible, give them at least one big night at the show where we don't have them up all night working on them, where we just get them in there, feed water, let them go to sleep for 8 to 12 hours, we're in pretty good shape the next day. So there are a lot of different philosophies out there. What I can encourage is be as smart as you can about making sure they're acclimated to that trailer, that they've been on it before, that we're putting as much fluids into them as possible. That long a drive, I'm probably feeding as hard as I possibly can that day or two before. All of those things. Let's fill that rumen up with feed and water. Let's put them on a trailer that's hopefully not stressful to them. And I like to get there and, if possible, get into that showgrounds, let them settle for that 24 hours or if at all possible. And we've had success doing that. And maybe it's because on our genetics, they're a little bit crazy. And if we were to lay over somewhere, it seems like it takes them 24 plus hours to adjust to that place. Then we go to the show and they still have to adjust again, which other animals are different. Definitely other species are calmer. They're better about traveling and hitting new places. So it's a tough question for me. It's something that I've put a lot of thought into and have experimented with. And I don't know that there's an absolute right answer. I think it does depend on that individual species, the show animal or the genetic line within that species, how much they've been hauled, all the factors come into play. And it's a challenge and it's almost an art. Maybe, Ryan, is the way we go with it. Ryan, when you guys talk about laying over, you're trying to lay over for a couple of days and then go into the show, or what's standard there?
I mean, even if you could just lay over for a few hours, like over a course of a night or an evening.
Just to break that drive up and get some feed and water in them.
Not only just to break it up, but to get them off the trailer, get some food and water in them, get them to exercise and some fresh air. I'm not going to speak for every species. I can't fathom how it wouldn't be beneficial for all species. That a 24-hour haul, it would be a must for cattle.
Yep, no, I would agree with that. And even on the goat side, and I consider them one of the most athletic species, we're going to, on the way to...
Of course you would.
Or on the way to Cow Palace or somewhere, we will stop at a gas station or a truck stop or something, take them off the trailer, take them for that walk, get that exercise, feed, water, and then back on. But everybody's going to have probably a different opinion on that, Chris and Christy, and you kind of have to experiment with it a little bit and see what works best on your own. But I agree with Ryan. In most situations, you're going to be better off getting them off the trailer, letting them stop. Some animals eat, drink, do fine on the trailer, maybe just need a little exercise. Others just don't. So it is a difficult. Great question. We appreciate you submitting it. Hopefully that gives you some guidance, or at least makes you aware that there's maybe no absolute on it and that you have to figure out which individual that you're taking, how that's going to work with that show animal. Next question, Ryan. Kimberly Kate, do you recommend a track for exercising sheep and goats? If so, what are good dimensions for the track, or do you know a person I can find the plans on building one? I think we've had a question similar to this. if I remember correctly.
I don't remember a question about a track off the top of my head.
I'm getting those questions every day, so I get a little confused sometimes, but I'll jump in first and love to have Ryan's response as well. I think it's the more tools you have available and accessible to work sheep and or goats, whether it's a treadmill, a horse hot walker, a track, any of those things. I'm not saying you're going to use them all, but having those accessible gives you more tools in that toolbox to work with. So if you have the space or the funds to build a track, I think it's always good. We have a treadmill, we have a track. For the most part, we're using our track if the weather permits. As we're feeding into Phoenix or Denver and we're frozen, sometimes snow covered, then we have to jump on the treadmill and do some different things, whether it's burning calories going forward or trying to stress muscle fibers and build muscle going backwards on the treadmill. So there are a lot of different directions, and a lot of people talk about using the dog and building adrenaline, and there's no question that brings adrenaline level up on sheep and goats. It seems easier to track sheep with a dog than it does goats. My problem with the dog is I'm not as good of a dog handler as I need to be, and I've gone through a couple dogs with minimal success, but there are people out there that have got a good dog. They're good with working with those dogs, and it works extremely, extremely well. So I think the more the better. I don't think it's absolutely necessary. We've had goats in our barn that each animal is different on what we're going to do with exercise. We've had some that basically stand in the pen most of the day. We get them out for a little walk in the morning or night and get them on the wash rack, but literally no exercise. We just feed hard. We go into a show and are capable of winning the larger shows doing that, but each animal is going to need its own individual protocol. Ryan, your thoughts?
A lot of it depends on your space and your financial ability, funds for that thing. A track for me is only as good as the dog is in a lot of ways. And I guess that goes into dog handling as well. I mean, yes, you can have a track without those things, but I don't think it's nearly as beneficial. I think a treadmill, while probably not going to be any more or less expensive than building a track and getting those things, again, you can always use it. It may be not as effective as a track sometimes, some areas, but you can use it all the time. Again, they make them where they go forward, reverse. The weather conditions don't matter. They take up a lot less space, but no matter what you want to do, and again, if you're going all out at this, you can, have everything. But I do think, like Dale says, you need to have access or ability to have one of these type of, exercise regimens. And so, again, I think it's just the individual scenario, depending on space and finances, but it definitely is a positive and an asset to have a way to do that in some type of exercise regimen.
Perfect. And I hope, Kimberly, that makes sense. And you sent us a private message in this question. I can get you some plans or some dimensions for the track, and there's a lot of different opinions out there, but we can at least give you some options. But excellent question. We do appreciate it. Ryan, that is all that we have for question and answer today. I really enjoyed having Mr. Beeler come on today and give us some insight on what to expect at the North American. Hopefully that gives our listeners a little bit of idea what to expect when they pull in down there. And everybody, I know we've said it many times, please be thankful to those show officials. And one way to do that is show them respect in what they ask you to do with the protocols. They're not trying to do this to punish you. They're doing it because that's the only way they can host a show. Until next week, be safe.
Y'all come back now. You hear it? And wear your damn mask in Louisville.